just in time for the international break where there's not that much else to talk about, Manchester United sees a coach-player spat go public in the worst way, and now we've got plenty of time to dissect Erik ten Hag versus Jadon Sancho and the mess that is happening now in the Manchester United dressing room. We're going to dive into that here on Pints and Punditry. Welcome back to Pints and Punditry here at Total FIFA Career Mode. Today we're going to talk about the Erik ten Hag press conference after their last game against Arsenal, where he called out Jadon Sancho, and then Sancho's response, which was not great in its own regard. And I've got lots of opinions on both sides, but what I really want is your opinion. So make sure you get in that comment section down below. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts on my thoughts. Let's get the conversation going. While you're at it, if you don't follow the channel already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me, like the video while you're at it. And of course, the conversation always continues on Twitter at TotalFIFACM, and yes, it'll always be Twitter to me. Jadon Sancho, not exactly covering himself in glory here, but I'm going to argue that neither is Erik ten Hag, and I think there's a lot of fault to go around here that this is publicly being discussed at all. And while Sancho did not handle things well and has done a number of things wrong publicly throughout his career, this one starts with Erik ten Hag. Because let's break down what happened. There was a question post-game, and obviously that's a tough time for a coach to get questions about anything after you just played an all-out close game that then conceded 2 late goals to a rival and you lost, right? So Erik ten Hag's probably on edge, and he has a history of, saying some things in front of the media that he shouldn't necessarily say or that don't come across all that well in the first place. So there is a history here with Erik ten Hag, but he has been, to this point, a pretty big defender of Jadon Sancho and an advocate for him, and he has given Sancho the support he needs to grow, and there are a few things at play here on Sancho's end as well that I want to talk about. But I did not love ten Hag's response here when asked why Sancho was not, why he didn't dress for the game, let alone be in the starting lineup. He wasn't even on the bench for this game. And it was a fair question by the reporter, and one that needed to be answered, but could have been answered so much differently. He went on to say that it's because of how training had gone that week, and at Manchester United there is a certain standard, and if you don't adhere to that standard, you're not going to dress for the games. He was vague about it, which was probably the worst thing he could have done, because now it just leads to lots of speculation as to what the heck did Jadon Sancho do or not do this week during training. But it didn't have to be this way. There were plenty of ways that this could have been answered without throwing Sancho under the bus like that. He could have said, at Manchester United, we have a lot of talent in this room and not everybody's going to get to dress every game. It's a constant competition for playing time. Jadon's going to get his playing time, not to worry. He's going to be back with this team soon, but we've got to rotate guys out. I wanted to focus a little bit more on defense on the bench this game, so we had to make a decision and he was the odd man out. But don't read too much into this. Jadon will be back. How hard is that? That's not that difficult, right? You have to be prepared for these questions as a head coach. The minute you don't put him on the traveling roster, you're going to get this question, right? So you got to be prepared for it. Now, maybe this was a calculated move by Erik ten Hag. And if it was, I suppose I respect it more because at least he did it on purpose, but I don't love it, particularly when it took place in the first game after the transfer window closes. Because by calling him out like this, you are basically ending his time here at Manchester United. Now, Jadon Sancho played a role in that too with his response, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think it's safe to say that there is going to be a long road of coming back for Jadon Sancho at Manchester United, and there's a very good chance he never sees the pitch in a United uniform again, and he goes somewhere else in January now because of how this is developed. But it didn't have to be that way. And if that was ten Hag's goal, one, there are other ways to do that without calling out what is still a young kid under the bus, thrown under the bus in front of the media. There are ways to say, hey, it's time to move on. There was also a better time for that, and it was a month ago. To not move him in the offseason, if you have no plans for him, you should have moved him, right? To not move him, and then a week, less than a week, after the trade deadline ends, you throw him under the bus and say, he's not here with us because he had a shitty week of practice. Man, that's tough. That's tough for anybody, let alone a young kid who came on a huge price tag and has underachieved. And I'm not excusing Sancho for some of his behavior, and he's had some disappearing acts over the years, and I don't know if there's mental health issues going on there, and there may be. And if there is, obviously I'm not in the dressing room, but if there are underlying mental health issues with Jadon Sancho, like we saw Dele Alli talk about in his story not too long ago, if there are underlying mental health issues here, and this is how Erik ten Hag chose to deal with it, fuck you, Erik ten Hag. That's not good. That is not being a leader of men, particularly young men who are thrust into the spotlight. Because I don't care what Jadon Sancho's price tag was for Manchester United, that didn't go to him. And yes, he's on a nice wage salary, but that just adds the pressure to a young man who is clearly struggling with things. So if there is a mental health aspect from Jadon Sancho's side here and his standpoint, Erik ten Hag, you've got to be better. You have to be a better leader of young men, and I would seriously look hard at him if he knew that and chose to handle it that way. Now, that's speculation, and I don't know all those details, but Sancho has had some disappearing acts where he, left the club and went and trained on his own for a little bit not that long ago, and he has come in under massive expectations and not lived up to them, and they are playing a role here. So there's a lot of stuff at play, which is why I don't like airing this in the media, and that's why I don't like ten Hag's approach. That's why the answer that I gave, and obviously I got to rehearse that a little bit, but again, ten Hag should have had time to rehearse this. You have to know this question's coming. That's a more curated, better response than throwing him under the bus. I don't care really what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe Sancho's a giant asshole in practice. Maybe he's lazy and doesn't do anything, and he doesn't deserve to play. That may be true. I'm not arguing that it's not, but it doesn't need to be said in the media. Doesn't make United look good, doesn't make ten Hag look good, it doesn't make Sancho look good. Everybody comes out looking bad here, and that's the problem. Now, on Sancho's end, God, did he make it worse. Players, particularly young players, but any athlete, you have agents, they have PR teams, right? They have people who are trained to do this. I have done this. I am trained in this field for media writing and public relations. Don't fire off a improperly written, poorly grammatically phrased text that you wrote in notes on your phone and then pop it on Instagram and think that anything's going to get better. Because let me tell you this, even if Jadon Sancho is 100% in the right, he doesn't come off looking good, right? There's no amount that he can say of, oh, well, don't believe everything you hear, you don't know everything that's going on. There are better ways to phrase that. Call your agent. Say, hey, I don't like what my club just did to me in public. I would like to have a response put out. Please help me write this. I will put it on my Instagram, but please help me write it. Make me a nice graphic. I mean, they've all got design teams. This stuff is not hard. And I get the emotion. Again, this is a young kid showing his immaturity. But to sit there, this is just like you and me angry tweeting or having a couple drinks and firing off an angry text. Right? This is a bad idea. Nothing good can come from this. And it's why, to a certain extent, athletes, particularly young athletes, really shouldn't control their own social media, but they're going to, and that's a losing battle. But they have teams there to help with these things, and Sancho chose not to use it, and he fired off his response, and he doesn't come across sounding good, particularly as a player with the history that he has. So he has not draped himself in glory here, but I will argue that a lot of this blame needs to be on Erik ten Hag for opening this can of worms in the first place. If he just shuts his mouth, if he answers the question with a little more tact and a little more professionalism, Sancho doesn't have to do this. And you have to know, if you know the kid well enough, you gotta know this was a possibility. And if this was Erik ten Hag's goal, which was to call out a young player and either basically write him off and get the ball rolling on a transfer, or throw him the knife and hope he falls on it, right? And he did. If that was the plan, that's really underhanded and devious and just a shitty way to handle a young kid who is clearly struggling, whether it's physically, mentally, just, with laziness. I don't know. I don't care. He's clearly struggling with something, and you just gave him the sword and hoped that he tripped and fell on it, and boy, did he ever. So A lot of blame to go around here, but I have not seen enough of it go back on Erik ten Hag. Too much of the blame here is going on Jadon Sancho, and he has some of the blame, and he should wear some of the blame. He did not handle his response well. But I don't have a problem with the fact that there was a response from him after what Erik ten Hag did. Erik ten Hag ripped off the Band-Aid, opened the can of worms, and it warranted a response. It just needed to be a better one. I'm going to put 60-70% of the blame on Erik ten Hag here for getting this ball rolling in the first place. It never should have happened, and a manager that handles the media better never would have let it happen. Those are my thoughts. I would love to get your thoughts down below in the comments section. Let's keep the hate to a minimum. I do not want this to be a bashing of Jadon Sancho. If you've got a point to make, great, make it, think it through. We're not going to do name calling. I do want to be aware of the fact that there may be a mental health issue and some struggles there going on. So let's have a little sensitivity, but that doesn't mean we can't have a good discussion about it. Hit those comments below. Follow us on Twitter at TotalFIFACM. And of course, if you've gotten this far and you don't already subscribe to the channel, go ahead and do that for me as well. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry. This is Total FIFA Career Mode.